unions do enough to protect their members against government's lockdown regulations? We're now joined by SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi to tell us what they are doing to support their members during COVID-19. Thabo Mdluli, good evening and thank you for your time. And I want to start here. You are supporting the call by the teacher union that is taking the Department of Education to court around the reopening of school. That court case will be heard on Tuesday. And the reason you're saying this is because you have not seen evidence, much as the department is even saying tonight that 94% of the schools are ready. You have not seen tangible evidence. Neither has government committed itself in those court papers as far as evidence is concerned that the schools are ready.
Well, we're looking forward to the Tuesday hearing in the Gauteng North High Court, and we are quite happy that the legal team of union associated with SAFTU, the Educators Union of South Africa, IWUSA, has prepared a solid case to convince the High Court judges that indeed the South African government will not be in a position to turn around 26 years of neglect of the poor black working class schools over a period of 2 months and make them places where it is going to be possible to sanitize kids in their hundreds of thousands, the teachers, to provide them with PPEs, to make sure that each and every school have a high hygiene standards, and to keep a social distance in a context where those schools are the face of overcrowding with hundreds and thousands of kids crammed into a small space with classrooms, some of them as big as 115 kids into a single teacher. And we don't think that those conditions will disappear in 2 months, but we will continue to put pressure on the government to make sure that each and every school have water and have sufficient space, that it goes closer and closer to the national norms and standards that were announced by the department several years ago.
So tell me, why is there a difference in terms of how you're assessing issues? 5 teacher unions, 4 SGB associations are satisfied with the progress. Why are you particularly holding a different view?
Well, I was listening to interviews with the leadership of one of those unions. Quite clearly, they are satisfied because that's what the Department of Education told them, and that the claims that they have run their own surveys with the principals is just not adequate. The issue is to go beyond the principal and go to the cold face of every school, in particular the schools in the townships and in the rural areas that normally will have no water, ordinarily will have no libraries and laboratories, ordinarily will have no sufficient space for existing students.
But is the truth then, therefore, not that unions just don't have capacity to do that? And therefore, how do they guarantee that to their members? How do you say to your members? And by the way, this is not a conversation around schools. This is a conversation broadly that about unions and how they've been dealing with their members. How do you say to your members, go to that workplace, go to that school, if one, you've got no capacity as a union to be able to go and test that environment, that indeed the safety precautions are in place?
Well, according to our own information, the reason why we are going to court or we are supporting IWUSA's court bid to stop the schools from opening is precisely because our own information tells us that very few schools will be ready to comply with the 9 fundamentals that have been published by the Minister of Education on Tuesday. And that's why we hope that and we're crossing our fingers that the judges will hear us, will look at the evidence that will be presented, and will make a decision in the best interest of our kids, of the teachers, and of the parents that will be sitting ducks at home, waiting for the kids to transmit the disease from the classrooms into their homes.
Okay, 2,084 health workers infected with coronavirus. Those are numbers that are confirmed by the minister, and about 18 or so have succumbed. I mean, when you listen to those numbers and you look at the role that unions play, and now with level 3 of the lockdown, more members in public service going back to work, are unions doing enough?
It's a very difficult terrain. That's the first thing that we must admit to. It's a difficult terrain. It's unprecedented. Every union has been stretched beyond its own capacity. Overall, the unions have not been at their best strength. There have been fragmentation. There have been disunity. People have no appetite to embrace the ideal of unity in our country, precisely because of some of the things that your listeners at 4-5 have been saying through your Twitter and your WhatsApp messages to you. We must admit those problems up front. But at the same time, we must recognize that there have been many, many strides that have been registered by the unions to try and protect the frontline workers themselves. And let's give you just a few examples. You will remember that whilst we were still at level 5, unions that belong to SAFTU had to stage a protest and almost got themselves arrested for that outside the gates of the Chris Hani Baragwanath hospitals to try and bring to the attention of the public that notwithstanding all of the promises the government was making that it is providing healthcare workers with the PPEs, the reality on the ground was that there was an inadequate supply of those. You will also recall that the unions in the Nelson Mandela, across all the federations, and they triumphed over the divisions that have been created by years of dividing workers and their unions, and worked together to highlight the fact that in the Nelson Mandela, the hospitals, public hospitals, were in disarray and certainly not in a position to provide adequate protection to members of the public. Had the unions not taken that example, perhaps the numbers that you see climbing in the Eastern Cape within the frontliners and in public would have been even much more worse. Also, you have to salute the fact that members of the unions refused to do dangerous work around the East London area and had to be suspended by the department just because they were refusing to touch infected members of the public with their own bare hands. As we speak, NUMSA triumphed over a company called McSteel, which reduced the workers' salaries by 20%, and was also initiating a process of retrenching them. It is the unions again taking that case up, and there's a strike as we speak in McSteel. If it was not because of the unions, the members of the public would have not known that many employers, not just one that NUMSA have to confront, but dozens and dozens of others are cutting the salaries of workers, are not following the procedures in the Labour Relations Act to retrench workers, are not claiming the UIF money that everybody should be getting, and are cutting all corners and not providing all of the protective equipments that they had promised and that are in line with the regulations that have been publicized by the government.
So tell me, with all these issues, though, with all these issues that you're raising, that I'm going to come in because I'm going to run out of time. With all these issues that you are raising, and I'm reading here from your statement, you're saying we're going to show the president, the corporation, and those ignoring SAFTU that even under these appalling conditions, we demand our right to be respected. Why is SAFTU being ignored around those issues?
Because we're not sleeping in the same bed with the government. We are not the sweethearts of the employers. Anywhere, we are the most hated federation in this country because we continue to raise the flag of fighting for the interest of the workers high when everybody is cooperating, hugging pretending to be fighting during the day and hugging during the night in other meetings and other forums. That's why we are being excluded. In fact, it is not just SAFTU that is being excluded, but hundreds and hundreds of other civil society organizations that are largely independent, that are militant, and that are genuinely trying to take up the issues of the most marginalized in our society. These are working in the healthcare, in the education sector, at the NGOs in their hundreds. We're working with them in the coalition of the civil society around COVID-19. We're working with other coalitions, including organizations such as those of Abahlali Basemjondolo, the people of Kolobeni, the assemblies of the people, of the unemployed people, and many, many others. All of those are not being consulted by the government because they are not sitting in that arrangement of NEDLAC where they're cutting the deals behind the backs of members largely.